The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. Oh, my gosh, I have got a special guest for tonight's 200th show. Can you believe it? Yep, 200, 4 years plus, something strong. I've lost count. Anyway, I do know my crew told me that this was actually the 200th show. I think I've been saying we were around 200 for a while, but tonight's the night. And I read this person's book a while ago, and it laid the groundwork for me understanding how emotions and past trauma can play into physical illness. And his name is Dr. Bradley Nelson, the author of The Emotion Code, How to Release Your Trapped Emotions for Abundant Health, Love, and Happiness. And Dr. Nelson is the developer of the most advanced form of energy medicine on the planet. He's a holistic chiropractic physician and medical intuitive, and he's one of the foremost experts on the emerging field of bioenergetic medicine and energy psychology. We'll go into more of his amazing bio later as we get into it, but I don't want to miss a second with Dr. Nelson. Thank you for being on the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, Sharon. It's really great to be here.
Oh my gosh, I am such a fan of your book and your work. And anyone who knows the shows has known that I've been delving into this area for a while, since I was first diagnosed 4 years ago. And I started in what I'll call traditional medicine, and was not finding the answers. And then I started to hear whisperings, and I think you were one of the ground layers, the trailblazers in this opportunity to understand our emotions and how it affects our physical body. But I wanted to ask you, I know that you have had your bout with a couple of things in your life that led you to this discovery. Will you tell us about those?
Well, yes, absolutely. Really the first life-changing experience that I had with healing was, goes all the way back to age 7. And I won't disclose how many years ago that was, but let's say it was a long time ago. I was really sick with the measles, and I had overheard my parents talking. And so I knew the plan. The plan was I was checking into the hospital the next morning and going into something called an oxygen tent. And I didn't really know what an oxygen tent was, being 7 years old. But the tent part sounded interesting, but I was really too sick to enjoy it. So that night, something happened that really changed my life. My parents came into the room. They'd made a bed for me upstairs so I could be near their bedroom. And everyone else had gone to bed. My parents came into the room, and I remember this like it happened yesterday. And my mother said to my dad, she said, "Honey, will you kneel down with me and say a prayer so that our boy will be able to get well?" And so they did. They knelt down by the side of the couch, and I'm lying there feeling really sick. And so my dad starts to offer this prayer asking for help for me. And knowing my dad, it was probably the first time in my life that I'd ever heard him actually pray. But something happened during the middle of this that was absolutely unforgettable. Somewhere in the middle of that short prayer, something happened. A change started at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body about that fast. And I was made well. Now, to go from being really, really sick one moment to being completely well and vibrantly healthy in the next instant is just so bizarre. And it's so unforgettable that it's burned into my mind. And if I live to be 1,000,000 years old, I'll never, ever forget it. And so I waited till my dad was done praying, which didn't take long. And I said, I'm better. God healed me. I'm better. And they said, that's fine, honey. Go back to sleep. Tomorrow you're going into the oxygen tent. But the next day proved that I was better. And so that was a very, very powerful lesson for me. It taught me that there is this unseen higher power that we can draw upon. Well, so I tucked that away in my memory and knew that there was something out there. Well, fast forward about 7 more years, things run in those 7-year cycles, right? And 7 years later, I was diagnosed with kidney disease. And what happened was I started getting these pains in my back. And at first I kind of ignored them, but then all of a sudden they reached this unbelievable crescendo and they would strike without warning. And so I would just be walking along, and all of a sudden, bam, it would be like somebody had run me through with a telephone pole or something, and it would just knock me to the ground sometimes and take my breath away. And so it was terrifying, frankly, for me. and really for my parents as well. And so they took me to the hospital and they ran these tests and they said, well, it's kidney disease, and your kidneys are hemorrhaging on a low level all the time and forming scar tissue, and we don't know if you're going to survive this or not. And so it was about a 50-50 chance for me, but there was nothing they could really do. And so my parents decided they would take me to see some kind of holistic physicians. They were actually old-time osteopathic doctors who practiced in this trailer house out on the edge of town. And it was in the middle of a muddy field. I remember when it would rain. They were in the middle of a wheat field in a trailer house. But they had busloads of people that would come to them to be healed. It was really amazing. So they started working on me. And within a few weeks, I was feeling dramatically better. The pains were way less severe, way less often. And within about a month, I basically had forgotten that I'd ever been sick. And so my parents took me back to the hospital. They ran all the tests again. And then as I recall, they ran the test twice. And they said, well, it's a spontaneous remission. Whatever we did must have helped. But I knew that it was these other people that had helped me. Western medicine didn't have anything to offer me. So I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life. Well, so then what happened was time went on and I got distracted. I discovered computers and got into computer programming, and I was very interested in that and business and so on. And I got distracted, and it was really a very powerful answer to prayer, once again, that brought me back to the healing arts. So when I got into practice as a holistic chiropractic physician, I developed this habit. And the habit was that when somebody would come in to see me, before I'd work on them, I would just take a moment and try to connect with that higher power. And of course, that higher power goes by different names for different people, but for me, it was God. And so I would ask for help, and it was a totally private, totally personal thing. It was just a momentary pause for me where I would just ask for help, please help me to help this person. There were times though, Sharon, during those years that I was in practice where someone would come in to see me and I didn't know how to approach their problem. I didn't know how to deal with their issue. And I would offer that silent prayer for help. And the information would just literally, in response, just flood into me like an avalanche of understanding and data, like just a pure download. And how to look at this and how to help this person. And sometimes it was a totally different way of looking at things or perceiving things than what I'd ever imagined before, or what anybody else had ever thought of. Really amazing. And so I know that higher power is aware of us all the time. And you can call that higher power God or creator or whatever you want, but that higher power is definitely real. So as those years went by, one of the main things that I learned was that all of my patients, no matter how old or young they were, no matter what they were suffering from, whether it was an autoimmune problem or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or cancer or you name it, infertility or asthma or digestive disorders, or things like depression or anxiety or phobias or panic attacks or PTSD or eating disorders, all of these issues had something in common. And what they all had in common was that an underlying cause of these things was people's emotional baggage. Now, we use that term emotional baggage usually in reference to somebody else, right? Like, yes. Oh, that she's got a lot of emotional baggage, or he's got a lot of emotional baggage. We all have emotional baggage. But what I came to understand is that our emotional baggage that we talk about is actually a real thing, and it causes tremendous problems for us. Now, to understand how this works, you have to first understand that the body itself is really nothing more and nothing less than a very complex energy field. I mean, if you look at your hand looks pretty solid. But if you magnify your hand about 1,000,000 times or more, eventually you get down to the level of the atom. And eventually you're looking face to face with a single individual atom. And if you could look inside that atom, you'd see there's really nothing in there. It's just empty space. In fact, the body is 99.9999999% empty space. And inside the atom, around that atom, there's nothing but little infinitesimally tiny energies that are zipping around at the speed of light. And so really that's what we are. We're beings of pure energy. And this is an understanding that we've had now for over 100 years because of quantum physics. But we now are living in this age where the practical application of quantum physics is being done. And that's what the emotion code is really all about. What happens is, you see, when you're feeling an intense emotion, maybe it's anger or resentment or depression or grief or sadness, whatever it might be, what's going on a quantum level is that your body is actually taking on this new vibration. You see, every emotion has a different frequency. Maybe anger is here and shame is here. They're all different, but they're all pure vibrational energy. And everything in the universe, ultimately, if you get right down to it, it's all energy. Thought is energy. Our bodies are energy. The earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, it's all energy, all of it. And so when you're feeling an intense emotion, sometimes that vibrational energy, that emotional vibration, is too powerful. And so the physical body can't quite process it. And so in some way that we don't totally understand yet, some of that emotional energy can become trapped in the body. We call that a trapped emotion. And a trapped emotion is literally a little ball of emotional energy from about the size of a baseball to about the size of a cantaloupe. And these things lodge in the body, and then they stay there, and they don't go away, and they distort the normal energy field of the body, and they cause pain. That's one of the most common things that we see. 90% of all the physical pain that people have is actually being caused by their emotional baggage. Imagine, think of all the people that are going to these pain treatment centers and so on. Think of all the people that are taking medication for pain, not realizing that their pain is actually being caused, their physical pain is being caused by their emotional baggage. It's an incredible thing, really, if you think about it. But that's what we've seen. 30 years now, 77 countries, almost 5,000 practitioners of the emotion code. And that's what we're all finding over and over, day after day. This is what's happening. So there's another effect, though, that these trapped emotions have, and that is that they cause you to feel that emotion, whatever it might be, more easily. So these things interfere with our lives because we all have them. Let me tell you a story. There was a man that came in to see me many years ago. And he came in because he had really severe back pain. On a 0 to 10 scale, his back pain was about a 9. And 10 is call 911, right? And so he's really in pain. It's been going on for a while. And I tested him using the emotion code and very quickly found that he had a trapped emotion. He had this ball of emotional energy that was causing his pain, or at least was contributing to his pain. It turned out it was actually the cause of his pain, because when I released that, which took just a few seconds, the pain went from a 9 to a 0. Boom, that fast. And to him, it was just miraculous. I mean, he couldn't believe it. He kept walking around and bending over, and he just couldn't believe it. Well, I was grateful that it worked so well. That happens. But what was interesting is a couple of days later, he came back into me, and here's what he said. He said, Dr. Nelson, my back is fine. He said, I still can't quite believe it. But he said, when I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about. And that problem was that for as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you would call a rageaholic. He said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids. I'm always kind of on edge. I got to watch the road rage. He said, I've been to anger management several times, hasn't really helped me. But he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger from me, I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel kind of relaxed and kind of peaceful. He said, how does that work? And at the time I said, I don't know. I said, I have no idea. But here's what we believe, okay? Think of this guy. This emotion that he developed, this trapped emotion of anger, was from 20 years before. And that emotional energy, that ball of anger, if you can imagine, this is kind of a strange concept, but this is how this works. This ball of anger had lodged in his body, in his low back apparently, and it was distorting the normal energy field of the body. You see, all the body is an energy field, right? But when you introduce a trapped emotional energy into that field of the body, now what you have is this ball of, in his case, anger, that was on a continual basis, it was distorting his energy field, you see. Now, when you distort the energy field of the body, you interfere with the chemical reactions in that area. You interfere to some degree with blood flow and lymph flow, and with everything that's going on in that area. And so one of the most common results, of course, then is physical pain, because it's the body letting you know, hey, I have this emotional baggage here, and you're going to feel pain until you get rid of this. That's usually what it is. So the other thing that was going on with him, though, see, not only was it physical pain, but in a situation, if a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to be triggered or become angry, he would become angry much more easily, much more readily than he otherwise would have. Why? Because literally part of his body was feeling that emotion of anger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, see? And so he would fall right into that resonant energy and go right into this emotion of anger so much more easily. Now, if you can imagine, first of all, this is a dramatic new understanding, really, of how our emotions can stay with us, how our traumatic events can affect us years and decades down the road, and how these trapped emotions interfere with the body and how they are the underlying cause of so many issues. In my own practice, I found that it was absolutely critical for me to deal with people's emotional baggage. If I didn't, they wouldn't get well, or they wouldn't get well nearly as rapidly. And I found that it was really a tremendous key. And in fact, for some people, it was the only underlying cause of their trouble. Let me share with you kind of a dramatic story that happened about that. There was a woman that came in to see me. She was, I think, 72 or 73 years old. And she came in for some other issue. We started working with her, and the very first thing that showed up is that she had a trapped emotion. And the trapped emotion was sadness. Now, using the emotion code, what we do is we tap into the subconscious mind, which is this internal computer of the body. We ask questions and we get answers, usually through some form of muscle testing. So what I'm doing with her is I'm asking questions, talking to her. She has her arm held out straight, and her arm is either staying up strong for yes or it's weakening for no. And so I'm asking questions about this sadness. Well, when did this occur? In other words, when did this become trapped in your body? Did this occur in the last 10 years? No. In the last 20 or 30? This actually, we were able to narrow it down pretty quickly. It had occurred in 1963. And so I thought to myself, 1963, I wonder if this is about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, because I'd seen that with other patients, of course, before. And sure enough, that's what it was. And as I verbalized that to her, and I'm at the same time that I'm getting a very strong yes answer out of her body, that's exactly what this is about. At the same moment, she's breaking down crying, and she's telling me that that affected her so deeply. And then when JFK Jr., his son, died in the plane crash a number of years ago, it was like it all came back all over again. And all she could do for days was cry. She couldn't work. She couldn't do anything. She was just in deep mourning. Well, that's what that emotional energy was doing. It was causing her to feel that grief, that sadness in an enhanced kind of way.
Wow.
Now remember that a trapped emotion like this is a ball of energy, right? And these can lodge anywhere in the body. So I wanted to know, okay, since 1963, since the 22nd of November 1963, where has this emotional energy been in her body? And so you can figure this out. So I asked, well, is this on the right side of your body? I got a no answer from her subconscious. It was on the left side. And it wasn't in the abdominal area, it was in the chest area. It was actually in the area of the left breast. And when that came up, all of a sudden, she and I were just staring at each other like a couple of owls with eyes like saucers, because about 4 years before she'd had that breast removed. See? Why? Well, that the assassination of JFK was part of that. See? It was part of that. And maybe the only underlying reason for that cancer.
Wow. I'm just, so many questions have come up during this time. That is amazing. We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Dr. Nelson. I'm really amazed. I had the understanding about the idea of our own emotions, something that maybe we felt, how do I describe this, that I guess I would take ownership for. But the idea that it could be something outside of us that we felt deeply is really amazing to me, because my gosh, I'm thinking about how do we uncover all of these things. So many questions. We'll be right back. And so many things he shared in this first segment were so surprising to me. Just a quick story that I was thinking about during the first part of the conversation was, years ago, my first understanding of this was having chronic shoulder pain and going to a masseuse that I'd known for a long time. And her immediate response to me was, well, if we take that knife out of your back, you'll be fine. And that metaphor has stuck with me for so long because it rang true when she said it. And that's what I always find so fascinating, is as I'm going through this healing process and uncovering more and more of those, when someone gives voice to it, it rings very true. It's like, yep, you found it, I know it. But I'm absolutely amazed at this idea of, it was, I say, a community trauma that caused someone to have a trapped emotion as well. Is that do you find that often? I haven't ever heard of that before. I'm really surprised by that.
Well, the reality is, you see, it's all about the emotion that the individual person is feeling. See, so it's usually some kind of an external event that happens. Somebody dies, or your lover leaves you, or one of your children joins a gang, or whatever it might be, and then you have an emotional response to that. See, and we choose our emotions really in every circumstance. There are two times, though, two sorts of occasions where emotions will become trapped. One of those is where we feel the emotion very intensely, and it's just overwhelming for the body. Then the emotion can become trapped. And typically that's a case where we're choosing to feel a certain emotion, and we're choosing to really get involved with that emotion and really vibrate with it and really feel it intensely. The other kind of occasion, though, where emotional energies can become trapped is where an emotion naturally is trying to surface, but you're burying it. Okay, so maybe something happens and you're upset, and you decide you're not going to feel upset, and so you push it away. Men tend to have this problem more than women. Women are more in touch with their emotions. Men tend to bury everything. And culturally, it depends on the country, but especially in the West, that's very common. Countries like
The
the
old word
US,
stoic.
yeah, very stoic. Yeah, and some countries more than others. And so, so that's another occasion where the emotional energy can become trapped because it wasn't allowed to really surface. By the way, I just saw a testimonial come in from one of our practitioners, and she wrote this, and she said one of her clients, BJ, had a terrible case of rheumatoid arthritis for about 10 years. Did several releases of trapped emotions, and then her last visit to the doctor, she was told it was in remission. This is the first time in 10 years that it's been in remission. And the last time I checked with her, it's still in remission, just from releasing some emotional baggage. So I thought, since the topic of your show was autoimmune issues, we have a lot of testimonials about autoimmune problems, and oftentimes, like everything else, the biggest underlying cause is emotional baggage.
Oh, I can raise my hand for that, because it was about 18 months into my recovery, my experience of healing, that I started to explore the idea of trapped emotions and energy. And the deeper I got into the exploration and had a variety of different types of work done, it was amazing to me how quickly the relief happened. You mentioned that when you had the measles, it was sort of a whoosh, and a client that had a very fast healing. What surprises me is how fast, once it's acknowledged and dealt with, how fast the body can restore balance.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well, think about it. The body is an energy field. Now we tend to be stuck in this sort of Newtonian three-dimensional physical model of who we are, but the reality of it is the body is an energy field. So if you think of the body that way, then you can understand how something could change instantly, because it's just energy, and energy can change instantly. The reason our bodies are what they are, and why, even though we're made of all this energy, there's a great purpose, I believe, to our lives. And if you think about it, it's really fascinating to understand and to contemplate the fact that your body is this massive collection, almost an infinitesimally or an infinitely large number, almost, of these subatomic energies that are kind of all flying in formation, keeping your body together and holding your body together so that you can have this experience that you're having in this world. It's a crazy thing, but we've seen this kind of thing happen over and over and over for many, many years now. Pain, it's not unusual at all for people. In fact, I was just working on a woman yesterday on a webinar that had been in pain for 20 years. And when we found the underlying causes, suddenly the pain was gone. And she's tried all kinds of things and spent probably $100,000 on trying to get rid of this pain that she's had for all these years. So if you think about it now, and in her case, some of the underlying causes were trapped emotions, but that were actually inherited trapped emotions. So in other words, these were emotions that she didn't actually create in her own life. She experienced them during the life, or actually what happened was at conception, they were passed to her. So in other words, this was an emotional energy, an inherited emotional energy is something that happens to an ancestor, and then that energy is shared down the line. And so this is really a fascinating aspect of the emotion code, and something that that a lot of people aren't aware of. But science is now starting to show that this is true.
Now, I've experienced a family constellation. Is that similar to what you're speaking about, where there is an awareness or a bringing to the conscious of something that is passed through?
Yes, it's very much related. Let me share a story with you. Actually, this is one of the most profound healing experiences that I've had in my own life. It was really amazing. I asked my daughter one day. This is probably about 8 or 9 years ago. My daughter Natalie is one of our practitioners, and she was back then as well. And so I asked her if she would work on me. Now, I live down in southwestern Utah. She was living in Seattle at the time, and she said she'd start working on me. Now, we're not on the phone. I'm sitting at my desk working, and when she starts working on me, and by the way, there's a very concrete way that we do this, that we show people how to do this. It's all in the emotion code book. We call it acting by proxy, or working on someone at a distance. And the human body has this amazing ability built right into it to set aside its own needs to act on behalf of somebody else. It's a wild, crazy thing, but it works incredibly well. So she's working on me, and the very first thing that she finds is that I have an inherited trapped emotion, and the emotion is hopelessness. And when she discovers that, she starts feeling very emotional herself, which for her is kind of unusual. She's very analytical, very cut and dried, but that's how she was feeling. So she finds, as she's continuing the testing on me, she finds that I got this from my father at conception. That's when we receive these. They come with the DNA. I got this emotional energy, this trapped emotion of hopelessness, from my father at conception. He got it when he was conceived from his mother, and she got it from her mother. And my daughter's testing these things and going back. After my father, it stayed in the mother's line all the way back 22 generations, which probably put it somewhere in the late 1400s, this grandmother. Now, listen to this. All of a sudden, my daughter can feel that there's someone standing next to her, and she knows who it is. Intuitively, she knows that this is this grandmother, and she can feel the emotions of this grandmother. She can feel how desperate she is to have this emotional energy released from her posterity. That's what she passed down all those years. But she can also feel how overwhelmed with gratitude this grandmother is, who's been dead for 500 or 600 years. She can feel how grateful she is that this is being done. Crazy, right? Well, let me tell you what happened. When my daughter released this energy, it releases from everyone, okay? So when you have an inherited emotion, it's one emotion, but it's shared. It can be shared down many generations. When you release that from somebody that's living, it releases it also from everybody that's dead. And my daughter could feel it release from the grandmother and from all these other ancestors, and then she was gone. And so here I am sitting, probably 1,200 miles away at my desk working. I know she's working on me, but I don't know what she's doing. But all of a sudden, I have something happen that I'll never, ever forget. If I live to be 1,000,000 years old, all my life I had struggled with this feeling of hopelessness, okay? And in fact, during the years that I was writing the Emotion Code book, if anyone would have asked me to describe in one word how I felt about that project, writing that book, I would, without any hesitation whatsoever, I would have said, it feels hopeless. It felt like the hopeless project. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
and this is, and so, in fact, every day, I would have to psych myself up for 30 minutes to an hour before I'd be able to write, because I had to overcome the inertia of this feeling of hopelessness. Now, imagine living next to a factory. that you were born next to. And your house is right next to the factory. And this factory runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's a continual noise coming out of this factory, a hum coming out of the factory. Always. Imagine living there, you wouldn't even recognize, you wouldn't even notice that. But if all of a sudden the factory goes out of business and the noise stops, you'd really notice it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the silence would be deafening. And that's exactly what happened to me. When my daughter released that inherited emotion of hopelessness from me, it was the first time in my life when that shut off. Suddenly, for the first time in my whole life, I actually recognized it. I knew what it was. Oh my gosh, I've had that background feeling all my life. I didn't even know that it was there, but it's been affecting me, and now it's gone. And I called her, and she verified. And so it was an incredible thing. That changed my life. That was 2 years after the Emotion Code book came out, actually. I thought I'd cleared everything that every bit of emotional baggage that I had, but that one was still there. This is one of the reasons why it's a good idea to have somebody else work on you sometimes. We can clear our own baggage, probably 80 or 90% of it, but there are going to be certain things that we're not going to be able to get rid of.
Oh, when we come back, we need to take a quick commercial break. I want to find out how we can clear our own baggage, because I think that would be the first place to start, and call in the big guns when needed. We'll be right back. Question about this idea of ancestral emotions before we jump into the next part here, where how can we start working with ourselves. My first question would be, how do we know, or a practitioner know, the difference between an ancestral emotion and what I'll call a nurture emotion? I'm thinking of certain emotional responses I see in my mother, and I just thought I, quote unquote, inherited them because I've lived with her for the first 18 years of my life. And so sort of like a mimicry versus an ancestral inheritance.
Well, the difference is that inherited emotions are received at the moment of conception. And so they really are kind of a genetic thing, but they're easy to get rid of and easy to change once you identify them. The interesting thing about this is that science is now bearing this out. They've found that if you take a rat, for example, and you put it into a maze, as it's going through the maze, if it suddenly has a terrible shock or some fright that happens, even if it never sees the maze again in its whole life, it will pass the memory of what happened somehow to its offspring, so that they found that up to 14 generations in lower animals, that memory would pass down. So you could take a great-great-great-grandchild of that rat, put into that same maze, and when it gets to the point where great-great-great-grandpa was shocked or terrified, it will freeze, dead in its tracks, because somehow that energy, that memory was passed down. Now, science is trying to figure out how this is possible, but we know what it is. It's a trapped emotion. It's trapped emotional energy, you see. So typically how you find these, this is the chart of emotions. Okay, I'll see if I can get that up to the camera.
Which
so
is in the book too. I want to make sure everybody knows that if
yeah,
the chart is there up on the camera, but for those in the audio version, the chart is in his book.
You can also search for this on Google Images. You'll find it. So there are 60 emotions in here, and the chart is divided up into 2 columns and 6 rows. And so what you're able to do is you're able to ask, simply you ask the subconscious mind, do you have a trapped emotion? Do I have a trapped emotion? You can work on yourself. We teach different methods of muscle testing. And so you can learn how to do this. You can learn how to tap into your own subconscious, and then you ask questions like, do I have a trapped emotion that is contributing to my problem? And then if the body says yes, which would be a strong answer on muscle testing, then you simply ask, well, is the emotion in column A or column B? And the subconscious will give you one of those. So then that gets rid of half the list, right? There's 60 emotions. And then you ask, okay, well, let's say that it's in column A. Well, you ask, well, is it in one of the odd rows in column A? And that'll narrow it down to 15. So again, you're dividing it in half. And it's either in an odd row or an even row. And so then once you figure it out, let's say that you get the answer that it's in an odd row in column A, then you would ask, well, is it in row 1 or 3 or 5? And one of those will be strong. And so typically how you find an inherited emotion most of the time is that you'll be taken to a certain column and a certain row. But then if you ask, well, is it pride or shame or shock or unworthy or worthless or grief or whatever, the answer will be no, typically, on all of those, because the subconscious mind will take you to the row and the column, but it won't be able to take you any further until you use the word inherited, because these inherited emotions are special, okay? And so if you ask then, is this an inherited emotion? The body will then give you a yes answer, and down you'll go. Well, is it inherited shame or shock or pride? Oh, okay, it's inherited unworthy or inherited grief or whatever. And then you can ask, well, did I get this from my mom or dad? And you'll get an answer, yes or no. So really what our work is all about is it's all about teaching people that they have this massive intelligence within them that is their subconscious mind or their spirit or their unconscious, whatever you want to call it. But what we're teaching people is that they can tap into that vast intelligence. This is the intelligence that is within each one of us that is so smart that it can take a ham sandwich that you just had for lunch and it can convert that into new cardiac muscle cells or new nerve cells or create new blood cells. But I mean, it's unbelievably intelligent. That's how we are. We don't even think about it. Really, our conscious mind is like a little tiny peanut brain, and we're just along for the ride in these bodies. But our subconscious mind is so intelligent, it knows exactly, it knows everything you've ever done, every face you've ever seen in a crowd, everything you've ever eaten or tasted or touched or smelled, the whole history of your health or disease is in your subconscious mind. You got to believe me. I spent the last 10 years of my practice getting people well who had been told they would never get well, people who had been told they were incurable, that nothing could ever be done. And yet those people got well routinely. How? Not because I'm so great, but because I understood that the subconscious mind holds all the answers. And so in everything that we teach, what we're teaching people is that you can ask questions and get answers, and the subconscious mind has the answers. And if you just do what the subconscious mind tells you, that's the shortest distance from point A to point B. Point A being sick and point B being well. It's actually really simple.
It is really simple, Mike, but it brings up so many questions because I'm thinking of so many in our community, and I'm included in this, that I hear from who are told, I sort of anointed, you have blank autoimmune disease, and
Right.
get used to it. Get real are some things that we hear. And it's so wonderful that when I started exploring emotions, things opened up so fast. The healing journey accelerated incredibly well, to the point where I'm off all meds, and I have a lot of people telling me, like, this is incredible. I'm like, no, actually, it makes perfect sense when we begin to understand how the body heals itself. I'm always amazed at the infinite wisdom that the body and the subconscious, unconscious mind have for us. I'm curious, when you work with people who are dividing their time between what I'll call traditional medicine and other healing alternatives, do you find that sometimes they have trouble talking to the two warring factions on why they got well or how they got well? I find that some of my doctors are saying, but Sharon, you're not cured. Be careful, be careful. And I'm sort of like, I don't care what word you put on it. That's not my problem.
Yeah, well, I think that I think the medical community is gradually waking up around the fringes, that things are happening that they can't always explain, and that sometimes Western medicine just doesn't have the answers. And of course, they're trained that Western medicine does have all the answers, and they're also trained that if Western medicine doesn't have an answer for something, that there is no answer that could possibly exist, which to me is just kind of bizarre. But that's the thinking of, I would say, the majority. And some of that comes down from the pharmaceutical companies, that because they want to protect their financial position and so on. But if a doctor tells you that you aren't ever going to be well, well, let me share a story with you, actually, because I saw this all the time. And in fact, I spoke once at a fibromyalgia support group at a hospital in California. I spoke for about an hour, and there was a woman who sat off to my right who cried the whole time I was speaking. She just sat there and tears were rolling down the whole time, and I kept speaking. When this talk was over, she came up to me, and I had a hard time understanding her because she was kind of sobbing, and she told me that she'd had this pain this severe pain with fibromyalgia for 19 years. And she'd seen about 9 or 10 different doctors during all those years. They'd all told her the same thing. You're never going to get well. This is something that you're going to have forever. All you can do is just manage it, and that's it. Take these medications, etc. And she cried every day, she told me, because the pain was so severe. But she said that part of the reason why she was crying right then was because I was the first doctor in almost 20 years that she had heard say that there might possibly be some hope for this. So she came into the office and I started working with her. And she had a number of different things going on, but one of the big components, of course, as always in all disease processes, was her emotional baggage. And by getting rid of that emotional baggage and addressing these other imbalances that she had going on, within about 3 weeks, she was almost completely pain-free and off of all of her medication, except for I remember she had a little bit of pain in this thumb because it was arthritic, but the rest of it was gone. Now, that might seem unbelievable, but the thing about it is you've got to understand that Western medicine is really fantastic at acute problems. I mean, if you get run over by a train or something and your leg has been severed, they can probably reattach your leg if you get there quick enough, which is kind of unbelievable, right? I mean, it's amazing what they can do. They're great at acute problems, but at chronic problems, they're not so good. And so what they have is they've got surgery and they've got drugs. And drugs most of the time don't really cure anything. Most of the time they just kind of mask the symptoms of the problem, right? And so they also have all kinds of harmful side effects. And so that's not usually a good long-term solution. And most people don't need surgery. So then that's it. That's what they have. So there are lots of other ways. And that's kind of what this is all about. The emotion code is just a simple way to find your own emotional baggage and get rid of it. You can do it yourself, or you can find a practitioner. You can go to healerslibrary.com. You can find a practitioner that can help you.
Wow, fantastic, amazing. What happens when we have you ever bumped into what I'll call secondary gain or contributing types of things where maybe the emotion doesn't want to go for whatever reason, that maybe they don't have to vacuum because they have back pain? Do you ever bump into something like that?
Well, what we see is secondary gain is really one of the 4 big reasons why people don't get well. And the other ones basically just involve not being aware that there are other alternatives. And for a lot of people, that's the case. But the secondary gain can be the most difficult one, as far as a lot of people don't even recognize that that's why they're staying sick. But you can muscle test that, and you can find out, and you can, if a person really truly does want to get well, the subconscious mind sometimes is not okay with that because they're sick, because they have emotional baggage, because they feel like they need to be punished maybe, or they don't feel worthy to get well, or it's not safe to get well, or whatever. So there are these underlying reasons sometimes in the subconscious that need to be dealt with. But yeah, if a person is really stuck in that position of getting the secondary gain from their sickness, they have to really be willing to get well, and they have to recognize their own issue about the secondary gain. Once they realize what's really going on, oftentimes that's enough to shift things.
That's what's surprising to me, is how once the unconscious becomes conscious, how easy it is in some respects. Obviously, you have to deal with your own issues. Sometimes facing yourself can be painful too. But it surprises me how fast that once the unconscious becomes conscious. Do you find, though, at times that the unconscious is protecting or holding back a little bit at first, because maybe whatever reason, I'm not understanding the process, but maybe
sometimes
the unconscious goes, well, they're not quite prepared to deal with it?
Well, that can happen. We see that especially with what we call the heart wall. 93% of people at some point in their life have felt like their heart was going to break. And so their subconscious mind will put up literally a wall made from their emotional baggage. So it's a wall of energy around the heart. The heart is really the core of our being. and the source of love and romance and creativity, just like the ancient peoples believed it to be. We're finding now through scientific evidence that they were right. The heart is really a second brain. And so 93% of people have this wall. And what I found in my own practice was that getting rid of that wall around the heart was absolutely critical for people to be able to get well, because the heart is sending messages to all the cells with every beat. And so when you have that wall, not only is it more difficult to find love and create the life you want, and really be able to manifest that perfect blueprint of your life that is held in that heart of yours, which I believe is true for every single person, it's harder to heal when you have this energy wall around your heart. So this is one of the things we teach in the Emotion Code, is how to get rid of this, how to take down that wall. And the reason why I thought of this is because sometimes some people, when we ask, do you have a heart wall? Sometimes, of course, the answer is commonly yes. And then we'll ask, can we remove an emotion from the heart wall now? And sometimes the subconscious mind will say no. But usually if you give the subconscious a week or so to think about it, and you come back and ask the question again, it'll usually be, okay, yes, it's time for me to get rid of this and start moving on.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. We're just down to about, the last 5 minutes or so, and I want you to share anything questions I haven't had a chance to ask you, anything that's you're really wanting to get out to the world today, as well as how we can find you and more about where we get your book.
Absolutely. Well, you can get a couple of pages, a couple of chapters as a sampler right now. Our book, The Emotion Code, is temporarily off the market because it's coming out as a hardcover, a revised and an expanded hardcover edition coming out through St. Martin's Press, and that's going to be in May. So the book is off the market right now, but you can you can go to our website and get lots of information. You can go to healerslibrary.com. You can go to emotioncodegift.com and get the first couple of chapters of the book, and not only in PDF form, but also in audio form. You can also, there is an app that's still available online, and you can go to the App Store or the Google Play Store on your mobile device and just search for The Emotion Code. And there will be the first couple of chapters in the book on audio, and that you can also read. And so, yes, there are videos online, of course, on YouTube. Our website right now is healerslibrary.com. I have a personal blog at drbradleynelson.com. It's DRBRADLEY Nelson.com. And, the bottom line is that this work really came about during those years that I was in practice trying to help my patients. And so I was kind of in a state of prayer all day long, because every time somebody would come in, and I saw, of course, multiple people every day, every time somebody would come in, I would take a moment and ask for help. And I'd ask for help and ask for help all day long. I'm asking for help. And that's really where this came from. The beautiful thing about this is people can learn how to do this themselves. Of course, we have, like I said, almost 5,000, or somewhere around 5,000 practitioners now of the Emotion Code in 77 countries, last I looked. And at healerslibrary.com, there is a practitioner map. You can look at the map of the world, and you can find somebody probably in your area. But our practitioners also do work at a distance, and so you can find somebody that can work with you, and they might not even be in the same hemisphere. They might be on the other side of the planet, but it doesn't matter, see? And so it's really pretty amazing. And it's time for us to really wake up and realize that there's a method now on earth that enables us to very quickly get rid of our emotional baggage, so that, you see, when you get rid of enough emotional baggage, enough of your trapped emotions are released, it's almost like stepping out of this old suit that you've been wearing, and you step out of that old suit of emotional junk, and suddenly you step out into this, or gradually you realize that you have changed, and it's like stepping out into this new state of being that is really much closer to who you really are intended to be. And you become a better instrument for that higher power. You're able to feel the love of that higher power for you. We've had many testimonials come in about that. People are able to fall in love, especially when the heart wall is removed. People find love, not uncommon at all, even at advanced ages. it's really an astonishing thing. And it's about cutting ourselves loose from all the stuff we've been dragging through our lives. It's also about releasing the emotional energies that have been inherited. And it's not only releasing us in that case, but it's also releasing our ancestors and healing them on some level, because that emotional energy is being released from them. So, so the bottom line is that we're living in a very, very special time when the ability to heal, which is a birthright that every single person on this planet has innately, we all have the birthright to be a healer. And the emotion code is the simplest, fastest, easiest way by far to actually take back that power and to learn that you can heal and that you can help your husband, your wife, your kids, your parents, your grandparents, your friends. You can do this. And it's an astonishingly powerful thing. I'll share one last story with you before we go. Some time ago, I was talking with a woman who told me that she got the emotion code and got the book on audio, and she started reading it and listening to it. And her son started reading it and listening to it. And he started practicing with his friends, and she didn't pay too much attention. But a couple of weeks go by, and then the phone rings, and she picks up the phone, and there's a woman on the other end of the phone line who identifies herself as the mother of one of this woman's son's friends. And she says, listen, your son has been doing this emotional thing. And she said, I don't really understand it. But she said, I have to tell you something. She said, my son has had a severe phobia of water all of his life. And she said, it's been very disruptive to his life and our life as a family. We've tried everything. We've taken him to everybody. Nothing has ever touched this. But she said, right now I'm at the community pool. She said, my son is out playing in the water with the other boys for the very first time in his whole life. She said, your son did this to him. She said, I can't understand how this is possible. I can't wrap my mind around this. What in the world is he doing? And those two boys are only 11 years old. That's how powerful this can be, and yet how simple. So if an 11-year-old can do it, so can you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nelson. This has just been an awesome hour. And I want to just say how powerful, once I understood trapped emotions and the power of energy healing, my own healing from my autoimmune disease accelerated at a very rapid pace, where all of you have been following the show know that I have been thriving for quite a while now, and just continuing to want to absolutely share all this powerful information like Dr. Bradley has. And just a quick little note that there might still be some copies out there. I ran out the other day and bought a copy at an independent bookstore and then to share with a friend. So it may not be available online right now, but you might be able to find it out there as well in some of our wonderful independent bookstores that I love to support. So thank you, Dr. Bradley, for Nelson, for being on the show. This has just been amazing. Everyone, go have a great week, whatever your adventures. Join me next Friday night, 7 p.m. for another episode. You'll be able to find the transcript of Dr. Nelson's up on understandingautoimmune.com very quickly. It's always a couple of days behind the show, but it'll be there shortly, because I want you to go back and reflect on some of the things he said, because it is so powerful and you'll need a reminder, I'm sure. So everyone, as I said, have a great week. Whatever your adventures, join me next week. Enjoy.
The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only. What you hear, read, and see on Life Interrupted Radio is based on experience only. The information presented here should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and/or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on Life Interrupted Radio.